We are back, Empires of the Future. Today, going to be talking about gap years and all that.
Yeah, about the year that you worked at the Gap.
There you go.
Right?
I mean,
selling clothes.
If only that were the case, what a story it would be. No, that didn't happen. How you been doing today, Denton?
Doing well. Hot. It's a nice warm day out there today. This whole week has been warm. Kind of the heat wave of June for the year, I guess.
Yeah.
And, been up in the 90s. Heat index well into the hundreds.
Yeah, I looked yesterday and it said feels like 106 outside. It's like, well, there's something to look forward to.
Goodness. Yeah. Which is, especially difficult probably for you. Now, today, you've been at a funeral this afternoon.
Yes.
Was there a graveside?
So there was, and it was hot graveside. A lot of sweating people.
Yeah.
But it was a really good one. This is one of those funerals where this is she was faithful Christian, faithful mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother.
How old was she?
Almost 101, not quite 101. Married to her husband 79 years before he passed just last year. Took care of her family. Everybody knew where she stood with the Lord and where she stood with them, and those are the best kind.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Praise God. Yeah, what a blessing that is to get to take part in that. I think often, well, not often, but not as often as I should also at the same time, about sort of the blessing that funerals of believers are, and the importance of thinking about death and dying. And it's not really something that we think about that often, but I think it's good for us to think about. I think the author of Ecclesiastes would encourage us to do so, that there is value there. And I think especially when you're at the funeral of a believer, of someone who you saw live out their faith, and the way it affected not only them, but as you were mentioning, it affected generations. Yep. I don't know if we want to say who it was, but Mrs. Hupp, she had an impact, her and her faith, not just on herself, but as you said, children, grandchildren, many of whom are still around the same church,
right,
where she attended for years and years and years. So that's kind of cool. It's sort of a legacy of faith that's been passed down through that family. So it is sad to see her die, but it is a joy to see the legacy continue, and also a joy that the legacy is not just the only remnant of her, but that there will come a day when each one of them, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren alike, will get to celebrate along with this matriarch and her husband who passed before her with Jesus in heaven. What a glorious reality it is for us to recognize that this great enemy, the death and the grave, do not have the last word, and that's part of what we rejoice in as believers.
Yeah, it reminds you of what we can count on, of what kinds of things in life that God wants us to have a relationship with Him. He wants us to invest in our families. He wants us to value these everyday sorts of things, because there's a lot of hardship in life, and it makes you realize that we need the Lord, we need each other, because while we all want good things to happen all the time, a lot of times, miscarriages happen. We lose jobs. We lose relationships. Things just go wrong in so many ways. And while we would love for that not to be the case, that is the kind of world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And this is going to fit with where we're talking about what we're talking about today, because a question that is really important is, how do we prepare our children for a world that is not always hospitable to them, that is not going to always give them what they want, where things won't go their way, where inconvenient things will happen, all the way up to brutal things they will experience in their life. And how do we get them there? How do we prepare our children for the kind of world that we have? And so we're going to be looking at that today. And it's always unique when we're able to get together, because what kinds of things in that day make you think about that? And this is deep stuff. This is actually, if you look into kind of philosophy at all, one of the changes that has happened in humanity is that in the ancient world, where there was less technology, and especially less technology around medicine, about things that could help us to feel better, to live longer, to not die because of disease or because of injuries, people lived in such a way as they went, I have to adjust to the world as it is because I can't change the world as it is. But the one of the lies that we believe in our times, because in part of the technology we've gained, is that I can change the world as it is so that it adapts to me. And each individual then gets this idea that I want the world to become what I want it to be. And you know as well as I do that that is a desire that we have. But certain days of our life, we find, oh, this is not changing in the way I want it all. In fact, it's going all wrong. And how do we prepare? How do we prepare our children for this? Because this is a basic human thing. But it is peculiar that we live in a time where a lot of people are operating in this unquestioned assumption, I want the world to change the way so that it's more convenient for me, so that it benefits me, or so that things go the way that I want. Yes, we're working on that project, but it's not gonna. And so then this is there's a kind of a simple thing that we're going to talk about today, a gap year, which is what? What is a gap year, then?
Yeah, well, it's an important distinction because actually when I was talking with my wife this morning, talking about what I had going on for the day, and I said we were going to record a podcast. She was like, oh, cool, what are you going to talk about? And I said, well, we're going to talk about taking a gap year before going to college. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's a bad idea, isn't it? I was like, well, it depends on what you're thinking of. And I asked her, I said, what are you thinking of when you think of a gap year?
Yeah.
And she said, well, that's where, like, after high school, you, like, travel Europe for a year before you go to school. Or, like, you just hang out. Okay. And I was like, yeah, that's not really what we're going to talk about. That's very different. But it's an important thing, and I want to preface by saying what we are not going to be talking about is that.
Right.
That a person should just, like, take a year after high school to do nothing, right, or travel, spend money, whatever. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a gap year. Mm-hmm. What we are going to be talking about, the definition matters when we're talking about a gap year, is we're talking about a year typically like after high school, before college, but not going directly into college, to allow a student, a young person, to figure out, okay, a whole bunch of stuff. I don't even really want to pinpoint one thing. For example, what are you going to get a degree in college? I mean, it's one of the first questions that you're asked when you start to enroll. They won't let you just come in with no plan. Like, you have to pick one, right? Yeah. You have to decide what it is that you're going to pursue in college. And a part of that decision ought to come from what you want to be doing as a career, what you want life to look like after college. And that's a big question to have figured out, having only been a elementary, middle schooler, and then a high schooler. Like, even a senior in high school, to have an expectation of knowing, oh yeah, I could decide right now what I want my career to be. That's a pretty big expectation, pretty big burden. Some people have it figured out. Some people, even as a senior in high school, know exactly what they want to do, and they end up doing that for a long time.
Yep.
I would actually point to my wife as something of an example of that. My wife, from a young age, knew that she wanted to be a teacher, and she finished high school, went straight to college, got a science teaching degree, and has now been teaching science for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So certainly there are those, but I think far too many, and you can see this in a number of ways, but far too many people go directly into college from high school thinking, well, this is just what I have to do next. Yeah. Whether to appease my parents and their expectations, or whether to appease society and society's expectations, or for myself to, people will often talk about discovering yourself. I'm using air quotes, quote unquote, discover yourself. Feel the air quotes? I don't know if you can hear those air quotes. Here, I'll do them close to the microphone. Discover yourself. And I think that's a very, very expensive process of discovery. That is also, you don't need to spend that much money to, quote unquote, discover yourself. And so there is just a great amount of wisdom in saying, before you begin taking on these student loan debts, before you begin engaging in this, in the rigors of college and university, let's take a step back and say, first of all, there's no reason to rush into this. Mm-hmm. This idea that you have to have finished college 4 years after you graduate from high school is just, it's a it's a misnomer. Like, you don't have to. There are plenty of people who go to college well after high school and have no regrets in doing that, and actually tend to be much better students than those who are coming directly from high school. But that is, I think, at a surface level, what we're talking about when we talk about a gap year. Now, there's an article that we're going to kind of be referencing that talks about a gap year. It's an article called The Benefits of Taking a Gap Year by Erica Commissar. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Where she talks about her experience going to Israel and seeing their practice of sort of a mandatory gap year.
Right.
In Israel, it's mandatory that after high school, you enter into a year of service. And my understanding, and this is mostly from her article she's writing, is that does include military service, but it doesn't have to be military service. There are other service options that you can enter into, such as teaching and or social services type work, volunteer type work. But serving in some capacity, or I think also medical field is like an area.
Yeah, here, let me take us through the first couple sentences,
perfect.
and I'm going to hand it right back to you. I recently returned from Israel, she says, where all young adults are required to serve in the military or complete national service. Seeing this in action revived my belief that mandatory national service builds resilience in adolescence. The term resilience has become a buzzword in a world where children and adolescents are breaking down from mental illness in record numbers. Every parent wants to understand how to help their children cope with an increasingly stressful and complex modern world. Although the causes of the mental health crisis are multivariable, the emotional immaturity and confusion in our children over core values and purpose in life is a major contributor. These are key issues that could be addressed through national service during a gap year.
Mm-hmm. So she's talking, when she talks about a gap year, of kind of service oriented, or whether that be military service or otherwise. And I think there's something to be said for that. I am not necessarily going to take the exact approach of like, I think that is the right thing, the right process. Yeah. Although I do think entering into the military after high school is a very viable option for a couple of reasons. Mm-hmm. One is that if you go into the military and serve I think they typically are something like a 2-year term. I'm not a military guy, but I think it's like a 2-year term, right? If you do that and then step away from the military, you can actually then, because of the way that things are set up in our country, you can have your college paid for actually after that. So there's something very practical about that option for those here in the United States.
Yeah, and I think we can say from the start that it's generally not as popular of an idea to think about going straight to the military from high school the way it might have been back in, say, the 50s or something like this. But it is still now what it was for people in that time, that if you know a young person who maybe their family's not really wealthy, who would benefit from discipline, look, that is a road that everything kind of comes in waves, and I'm concerned that this is an idea that is sort of just unpopular. Mm-hmm. But look, this is still, I mean, I read sometimes an author named Rob Henderson, who grew up in California, who grew up not wealthy, had a lot of struggles. As Charlie recently wrote a book called Troubled about his childhood going through the foster care system and these things. And going into the military, he says, is one of the major things that taught him discipline. Mm. He met people who brought him under their wing and said, look, this is how you buy a car. Don't do the things you've seen. Look, this is how you should go about some of these basic things of life. And if you grow up in a struggling family situation, you don't know how to do a lot of the basic things, and you make mistakes that will cost you for years. And so he credits that. And so that's from the start. We don't have to try to resurrect and take the reputation of an idea all the way back up, but it is a possibility. But like you're saying, really what we're talking about by a gap year is working for a year rather than going straight to school.
Yep. That's kind of the context I'm taking. And I think what she is talking about, though, does have some validity to it, in that what she's sort of pointing out, the article or the author here, Erica Commissar.
And this is Institute for Family Studies, by the way, is where we picked this up.
There you go. She's sort of saying, one thing that's happening with these kids, essentially, who are coming out of adolescence, coming into adulthood, is that they have this deep sense of pressure on them, heavy pressure to do well in school, to get this degree, to do all these things in order to make it in life, right? And what she's proposing is that part of why we're seeing so many issues with mental health and breakdowns and things like that could be remedied by basically saying, okay, let's hit the reset button. Let's take a pause, take a break, and not just do nothing, but let's find a way to help you not only relieve some of the pressure. And let me tell you, going from working in school and having the pressure of meeting expectations, grades, due dates, all these kinds of things, to, okay, now I'm focusing on working and making money, and I know that as I'm working and I'm doing a good job, I'm going to make money. Like, there is something to that actually for me, it was a great relief to not have to worry about grades and expectations and GPAs and things like that. So
yeah, and this is a great opportunity for us to just get right in that. So I just wanted to ask you some questions about how you ended up taking a gap year. Yeah. It wasn't through a traditional gap year of going straight to a workplace out of high school, but talk a little bit about your experience with work ahead of time, but then what made you take the gap year that you did?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I wish I had done it the more traditional way. I have a gap year. In other words, I do wish, instead of going directly to college right out of high school, I would have taken that gap year then. But what ended up happening was I went to college. As I said, you kind of have to pick what's your degree program going to be. Yep. On the advice of some who were giving good advice, they said, oh, you got to do accounting. Accountants make good money. A lot of the top executives and CEOs of big companies, they have accounting degrees. If you want a degree that's going to provide you a lot of good opportunity to be successful and wealthy, when I'm saying successful, I typically mean able to support yourself, well off, accounting degree is the way to do it. I heard that. That sounded smart to me, so I started at USI with the intentions of getting an accounting degree. And throughout my first semester, I found myself...
The University of Southern Indiana, yes.
Yeah, that's right. USI, go Screaming Eagles, right? I definitely found myself that first semester lost to a certain degree. I didn't feel like I was finding myself by any means. I felt like I was spending a bunch of money and didn't really know why. Because the one thing that definitely did develop throughout that time was that I knew I did not enjoy school very much. That became very clear to me, which I already knew, but in my mind I was like, well, maybe I'll enjoy college. Well, no, I didn't enjoy it in high school, didn't enjoy it in college. And then also to know that this degree program that I wanted to go for, the more I thought about, the more I learned about accounting, the more I was like, I don't really care about numbers that much. I don't really think I have a giftedness towards that. Like, it was just a bad plan, is where the conclusion I sort of came to. And so I told myself, you know what? I started my second semester, but during my second semester, when these feelings only grew, I decided I'm going to apply to work at Toyota. I don't know if they're interested in hiring a 19-year-old kid, but I like the idea of making money instead of spending money. And so I did. I applied at Toyota, kind of told myself, if I get into Toyota over the summer, I'm going to do that instead of go back to school. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm. I got hired on at Toyota. I've since learned that, they were happy to sink their teeth into a 19-year-old kid. At the time, I thought I was hot stuff because I got in there.
You had new shoulders, new knees.
That's right.
Mean, you were fully equipped with it.
Everything was fresh. Yeah, I'm ideal for them. I remember in my assessment, they make you do an assessment to see I think they made me do that just for the show of it. Not, sure. It's just how we make everyone do. But the guy even told me, he was like, so you did everything really fast, but your, what did he say? Your accuracy was terrible. It was so bad. So apparently, I did all the things they told me to do really fast. You just do it over and over again. But apparently I was really, really bad at getting it right. So, but he said, but that's no problem, and they hired me anyway. I realized since then they were just happy to have a young dude. But yeah, I went to work at Toyota and worked there for a year. It came out to right around just a smidge over a year, like a year and a week. that I was there. And it was during that time that I had a blast working there. And I know that I know plenty of people that work at Toyota now. I obviously knew several then, and they hear me say that, and it's like, oh my gosh, how on earth can you say that? Well, for one thing, I was in conveyance, which is a little bit more desirable of a job than certain jobs on the line. But also, as a 19-year-old kid, I was making what felt to me to be big dollars. I felt like I was seeing fruit from my labor, which that wasn't happening when I was in school.
Right.
I'm in school, I'm working, but I'm paying, not getting paid.
Right. And before that, you had worked at McDonald's.
Yeah, I'd worked at McDonald's. And while I was at school, I worked a couple different jobs. I actually worked at First Southern as the cage master. I'd hold the gym open for open gym and stuff like that. So I was working even during college, but to be none of those jobs paid anything like what I started making at Toyota.
Sure, yeah.
So for me, that was a really good season of making money, saving. I saved a lot of money during that season because I was still living at home, unmarried, saving a lot of money. But also, I had a lot of time to think, reflect, think about what are some interests that I have, what are some hobbies, what are desires, passions, all these kinds of things. And it was during that season that I started becoming more involved also in roles of leadership and teaching and stuff at the church. And had the opportunity to go to summer camp, learned about or got a feel for what youth ministry is like, and kind of loved it, loved the idea of teaching God's word. And that's when I began to move out of those desires and calling on my life, that then I felt like, okay, now I have a reason to go to college. And I went back to college, ended up finishing my undergrad at USI, and then went to the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary for that degree. And so, so that was maybe too long of a story, but that's sort of how that came about for me. And that's a part of why I say I wish I had kind of gone directly into the workforce right out of high school, because I think my path maybe would have been a little bit more efficient, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because there certainly were some classes I took that first year that ended up not benefiting me, other than what I learned during them, which, that's fine too. But
so let me ask then, my process is going to resonate, I'm sure, with a lot of people. I did not take a gap year. I did work while I was in college. I worked at my local pizza place, Mackey's Pizza in Harrisburg, Illinois, and it was a great experience. I worked part-time there, and so I did that while I was in college and worked a few other jobs. As college, as it does for some, it took me 5 years to get through, and so, you work it out. But what would you say are, say, 3, 4, 5 things that, rather than being abstract ideas, became real concrete kinds of ideas for you when you actually went and worked a full-time job at 19?
I would say one of the things that definitely was the case was just the it's very easy to look at student loans on a screen, click a button and say yes to them, and then know, or not really maybe think about the fact that you are going to have to deal with the consequences of that. But it might be way later. They're happy to push it off way down the road, kick the can down, but you are going to have to deal with that. Working a job and seeing the fruit of my efforts and the amount of money I was making for the effort I was putting in, I think it did give me a much deeper appreciation for the value of the dollar that was being spent, whether at college or otherwise. But certainly then I felt the weight of, when I would write my check at the bursar's office, I definitely felt the weight of that money coming out of my bank account to pay for college a lot differently than I would have otherwise. Yeah. Which goes a long way in making sure that what I am doing here at college is for a purpose and is getting me towards a legitimate goal that I know I have had time to not only think about, but also begin to invest in. So that was a big one. Definitely, it gave me time to really solidify, okay, what do I want to be doing in 5 years? What do I have giftings for? What do I not? So those kinds of questions were answered in large part due to, I want to say, just acting like an adult. That's a part of it, because it wasn't just through working at Toyota that I learned those things. Yeah. It was my mindset changed when I joined the workforce, and I really began to think and act more like, okay, an adult. What do adults do? Like I'm not a high schooler anymore. I'm not as dependent anymore. It was during that season I also bought my first car and those kinds of things. So so it definitely solidified that as well in my mind of thinking, okay, what does it mean to live responsibly as an adult, which helped me a lot in college. Yeah, I'd say those are the two biggest things. There's probably more if I were to really sit and dwell on it. I could come up with more, but those were major.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're talking about it, I mean, I'm just thinking of you going, this is what an hourly wage that I can get right now is, which gives you a measuring stick for exactly that money you're talking about. I mean, but you saw this is a real boss. Yeah. And this is a real boss who has certain expectations that I either meet or I don't meet. Yeah. This is a real job where it matters if I show up or don't show up. It matters what kind of attitude I come with. I mean, the as you are describing it, and I'm thinking about you going through that, the number of real concrete things that you can't, I mean, we're not running down anybody who tries to prepare young people, but a part of the challenge for all of us, especially those of us who can remember being young, is to look back and to go, it doesn't matter how much somebody explains to you until you have an experience of just these sorts of things. What was my boss expect of me? Is that guy over there who's my friend going to have to do more work if I don't show up? Until you experience that, it's all just an idea to you. But when you were able to put names and faces to those things, it sounds like it changed the experience quite a bit.
100%. And also, I was working at a place where I was meeting people all the time that are like, oh yeah, I have a English degree. Oh yeah, I have a teaching degree. Oh yeah, I have this degree. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I'm starting to figure out, okay, what are the degrees I definitely don't want to go for? And because the story was the same for all of them. I can't make as much doing that as I can here. Yeah. Which told me, all right, I've done pretty good here. I'm making as much money as these people with these degrees have, and they've got the student loans to go with it. But it also informed me as far as, okay, what kind of degrees, if I am going to go back, what do I not need to be relying on? Which one of these degrees is unreliable, you know, or unvaluable, we might say.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a story. While you could think about, the story that we talked about earlier, which is sort of on the decline of people going straight from high school and going into the military, one story that is just clearly to me still not understood is every college, university is a business who is offering a path to a degree. That is their product. A really important question is, what is the value of the various degrees that they offer? Right. And I worked with young people a long time, and I'm telling you, that's not a question that young people are being trained to ask.
No, that question is actually shot down. They're told that's an inappropriate question to ask. You shouldn't be asking that question about college. I had professors at USI that were like, what a terrible reason to be here. It's kind of like, it's easy for you to say as you're sitting here as a professor making all this money, right? But like, that is the rational thing to say. The alternative is, I just have thousands of dollars to spend in order to broaden my mind and my horizons.
Look, we as ministers can say, yes, there are more kinds of value than just financial, but we should start there because there's no such thing as a free lunch. Everybody's got to get the basic resources for living every day. And so, that's a strange idea to shoot down to me.
Yeah. I tell you another thing too is kind of funny about this is it did give me a very real and I think practical and down to earth rooted idea of like, okay, what is life going to be like when I'm done with college? Yes. Because I spent some time in the workforce, and I remember this played out in a certain class I was in. It was like a business communication class, specifically dealing with conflict and stuff like that. But one of my professors, and he was one of my favorite professors, and he was doing something good here. He wanted to help people get a good grasp on reality. He asked each of us, he said, I want you to write down what you expect to be making when you graduate. When you get your first job, and let's assume it's within, like, you use your degree to get it, right? So let's assume that, right? What do you expect to be making? And I'm telling you, man, the numbers were wild. Right. What these people just thought yeah, I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to be making $80,000, $90,000. And that was a bunch of them. That was like and several of them over $100,000. That was their expectation. I wrote down $30,000 on mine. And I was definitely the lowest one. But I also, when he asked me, he's like, whoa, that's kind of a low number. Why'd you say that? And I was like, well, I know what I want to do when I get out of here. I want to be a pastor. And I have no expectation that I'm going to be working at some great big church that's going to pay me a huge salary or anything like that. And I wasn't far off. My first full-time salary with a church was not much more than that. And so, but having that expectation, knowing that, and he basically just, I think graciously, it was a good thing he did, told a lot of the people in there, like, you need to just grossly lower your expectations significantly, because those were way off.
Well, and bravo to that professor, because the reason I say let's start with the financial questions is that you are when you walk onto a university campus, they have sold you a product. When you see these enormous welcome centers, what you should think of, in my opinion, is a lot of tuition built that to say to others, look, this is an impressive school. Don't you want to be here?
Right.
It is a business.
Right.
And it is a business that has done well in, say, the last 100 years, but it is also a business that has gone from what I would say when I was born in 1980. The product then was much more competitively priced then than it is now. It has become inflated because people, and one of the main reasons, in my opinion, is that people don't ask the right questions.
Right.
All the way down to, as the first in my family to graduate college, I did not at all understand why, as a senior in high school, I started getting every institution and their brother sending me a letter saying, why don't you check us out?
Yeah.
Send us a letter, see if we would receive you into our school. Like, that's a weird thing. Like, is it hard to get into your school? And this whole game, there's a lot happening there, but that is the sales pitch. There is a sales pitch happening, and you need to know what's happening. You need to know what you're a part of, what they can offer you, and what they can't offer you.
Right.
And especially, again, bravo to your professor. And praise
That
God
was
that
great.
there are professors who say, you need to be realistic about what's going to happen when you get out of this place.
Yep. That was Dr. Durham, and he was awesome, and I think the kind of guy that you want to look for in a professor. But I had other great professors, and I had a wonderful experience at college. And so, like, a part of this conversation is not to say, like, college is a bad thing and that you shouldn't go to college. I had a great experience there, and that led to me being able to get into seminary, and I think also it educated me well and prepared me well for not only my postgraduate studies, but also for not just for my graduate studies, but also for my ministry. Like, I feel better prepared because of my communication studies degree, which is what I went for, thinking, hey, a big part of what it means to be a pastor is being able to communicate well. And so that's what I went for. So
and so, anybody who's listening who is a college professor or works at a college, I agree. This is not at all to run down colleges, but it is, we need to know what we're getting into and what I would think anyone who is an educator would agree. You need to know what a school can do for you and what it can't do for you.
Right.
Because a school most of the time doesn't give someone a work ethic. If you don't bring a work ethic to a school, I think a lot of times even the work ethic of getting the studying is a challenge. But even that is strange, because just reading books that no one particularly needs you to read, and then writing papers that no one really needs you to write, in my opinion, doesn't prepare you that well for a real world where you need to take various kinds of resources and make them into useful things, or learn how to be of service to others. It's one of the things that's so tough about education fundamentally. This is a challenge for every educator, is that we train people to do things by having them do things that don't necessarily need to be done, and then taking tests, reading books, taking tests. And that's part of the challenge of being a student is this does not need to be done. So I don't feel that great of a motivation. Well, that's a real challenge because what you want to get to in life is to be a very useful person who can take raw materials and turn them into useful things, who can learn to serve others and to help others. And that is you will become very worth your pay if you learn to do those things. But that's what's hard being young. And so that's just a challenge that I think doesn't get enough discussion. And a part of the problem too is that we're in school for a long time, and so you're delaying so much. And so I can imagine that for you to take this gap year, at least you're looking at this situation and going, oh well, I spent a year using the abilities that I do have. I see how it provided a useful service and how that turned into money. And that is enormously important. And I think that in particular, young men have a harder time when they can't see the end enduring the middle.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%. That's why that's what motivated me to sort of apply to Toyota and get out, because the end, whenever I started at college and with an accounting degree and didn't know what I wanted to do really, it was that sort of not knowing what to do and certainly not wanting to do the thing I was sort of setting out to do. The end, why would I endure that? Why would I keep going to school when A, I don't want this to be my career, B, I don't see the ends as justifying the means. All these things, it's kind of like, yeah, it's very hard to stay motivated in that. And so I think there's something to be said for, I think there's a word to be said both to current students or young people and also to parents. Because I think to parents who think, oh, if my kid doesn't get into college, they're screwed. I would just love to set the record straight on this and say that's absolutely not the case. If your child doesn't go to or get into college because they choose to do nothing with their life and are lazy, then yeah, they might be screwed. But I'll say this: I am the only of me and my other two brothers. I'm the only one who's graduated college, and both of my two brothers have wonderful lives, wonderful families, and make more money than I make. And they did that without going to college, right?
And I know both of your brothers, and they have a work ethic. They show up expecting to work.
Exactly.
They understand the value of labor, and that's a big deal.
Exactly. What is going to do far more, if you're a parent listening to this, what's going to do far more for your children than a college education is you instilling in them discipline, work ethic. As the article we talked about noted, resilience.
Yeah.
I love that she used that word because that is something that's lacking. I think that's why mental health is seen, part of why, not the only reason, that is a part of why mental health has seen such a decline in the younger generation, is that this idea of resilience is just about gone, and needs to be revived. And I think one way that kids learn that is by entering the workforce, is by going and doing things that require something of them, more than just continuing in this sort of childhood, things are given to me, I go and I do them, everything's put in place. It sort of forces you out of that to realize, no, I'm going to go work, and because I am working, I'm going to get paid. And if I don't work, I don't get paid. You know, it's simple, yet it's so necessary for kind of forming this, I think, toughness and resolve in a young person at an age when it's especially important. And it made me a better college student after the fact too.
How?
Working at Toyota for a year. Well, it not only helped me because of the vision and knowing what I wanted to do, helped me, as you said, endure the middle, right? So knowing the ends helped me endure the middle dramatically. I knew that when I finish here, I even have more schooling. Like, I want to go to seminary, right? And knowing that motivated me to say, yeah, this writing assignment is not very fun and doesn't feel like it's going to help me that much. But I know that if I make myself a better writer, it's going to help me out when I'm writing things that I do care about and that do matter and that are important. So there was that. That was a big part of it. But also just being able to say at Toyota, for example, you do a lot of things over and over again. That's the name of the game on an assembly line, whether you're in conveyance or paint or weld, whatever it is, like you're doing the same thing over and over again. Very repetitive. It takes a lot of discipline, and it takes resolve to say, you know what, I've done this exact thing 100 times today, but I'm going to go ahead and do it 100 more.
Yeah.
I'm going to just keep doing it because this is what I need to do in order to meet the expectations, in order to get paid. Very similarly, that same sort of fortitude, when I'm sitting down at my computer to write a paper and I'm tired of thinking and I'm tired of reading, it's a very similar kind of fortitude that says, even though I'm tired of it, even though I'd much rather be playing a video game, watching TV, whatever, I know that in order to meet this deadline, in order to get this grade, in order to do these things, I've got to keep writing. I've got to keep doing this thing, even though it might be late, even though it might be early, even though maybe I want to be doing something else. I've got to keep doing it. That's a kind of fortitude that it can be developed apart from going to the workforce. But definitely for me, it helped. Yeah. It helped dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what I'm hearing you say to parents right now is do not fear. There is a culture of fear around school right now. That thing that you mentioned early on, boy, if you don't send your kid to college, I mean, who knows? What kind of future will they have? And the answer to that is, look, college is not going to solve all of your child's problems. This is an option of an experience that can be a part of a good life. College is an option that can be a part of a good life. But none of these things in and of themselves are going to fix anybody. What advantage I'm hearing you as you talk about people that you met there, there's a great advantage in every person you meet in a real work experience and hearing how they got there, what they think of it. When you hear of someone who might have gotten hurt, or you hear of someone whose life experience or life circumstances, that is, might have changed, what they are doing about it. There is enormous, because again, that's the world of adulthood. Yeah. Where all of a sudden you see, oh goodness, that guy is a normal guy just like me, but he's having to deal with some really difficult things, and this is how he's doing it. And you see both some people who are very impressive in the way they navigate challenging situations, and you see some people who give up or get angry. I mean, you just, there is nothing like a real experience of life in all of its challenge. But also, I mean, we were made, I mean, young people, I think about my kids right now. Always we're going, I want to know about the next thing. I want to know about the next. Well, this is real life. This is what we're all made to get to. Yeah. Now, look, real life has wonderful things that are a part of it, but it also has real challenges. Right. And young people, by the time they're 18, all of them want to really experience them. What is difficult about our world right now is many things are so complex that it takes a lot of education to get there. Sure. But in the meantime, it's not always the right answer to just say, well, keep on delaying most everything in favor of just primarily reading books, gaining book knowledge. And you and I know, having been to college, that a lot of what is the social atmosphere of college, it sort of trains you to be an adolescent for a longer time. It trains you to think still like a teenager, just to not grow up. And it is a dangerous thing to train yourself to not grow up, because you might then get out of college and still not want to grow up.
100%. Actually, I mean, we're about to go on another tangent, or a little tangent here, because that is the case, even with regards to, and I'm in favor of campus ministry, but even one thing I've noticed in campus ministry, what a lot of times it becomes is it turns very much into like just another youth group. Like, okay, I was in high school and had my youth group of my church. Now I'm in college, I have my youth group of college. Yeah. And a lot of times it's very similar. And then when they get out of college, it's like, holy moly, what does it look like to be a part of a local church? Because what I think it should look like is what I'm used to, which is youth group, whether youth group in high school or youth group in college, because that's oftentimes what they are. And connection with the local church becomes very difficult for people because they don't know what it looks like, because they haven't been encouraged in that, because the adolescence has been prolonged, right? Yeah. Kind of, sort of. That 100% is the case. And I could talk more about that even from my experience at USI. But getting out into the workforce, you're exactly right, helps sort of take that away. In a sense, remove some of the safety net, some of the things just given to you on a silver platter. But that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing because it helps you to learn and see, I can do this. I can make it. I don't need all of this care given to me the way that it is from high school and then through into college so often. I don't need that. I'm an adult now. I can make it. Just that for me was huge. Learning that, realizing I can live like my parents live now.
Yeah.
I'm able to go and make money like my parents do. And that was an important realization for me, to build responsibility, build work ethic, those kinds of things. I think that's what happens whenever you take that gap year. And now taking a gap year might mean you learn that you don't really want to go to college. What you want to do, you have discovered you don't need a college degree to do.
Yeah.
I think about the fact that you could easily go from, through grade school into high school and then into college. And we talk a lot about like political bubbles. Like a lot of times people are in their own sort of political sphere or bubble where they're not exposed to viewpoints from the other side or whatever. And that happens, right?
Yeah.
But also I think even like we can get into like career or vocational or educational bubbles, an educational bubble. And I don't know that I would have had nearly the same exposure to even like the trades and different trade options as far as careers go that I got had I not entered into the workforce. For example, you probably aren't going to have a ton of people in school, especially since a lot of schools don't have like shop classes anymore, like wood shop and machine shop and stuff like that. That used to be more common. It's less common now. You might not get much exposure to options of trade schools and apprenticeships and things like that if you are just in the educational sphere for that whole time.
Yeah.
And it could be that you might find out that something like electrical work or plumbing, you haven't put hardly any thought towards until you're an adult and your HVAC goes out and you have to call the HVAC guy to come fix it and then pay him that money. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, but I've already spent all this money and time at school, Yeah. But that's also another great value in it, is that it gets you out of that kind of just sort of isolated world to see there are other possibilities. There are other options, some of them very, very viable. Yeah. And you might love them. You might hate them. And then there you go. Well, that has, again, given you the knowledge that you probably wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she has 3 points she brings out about why it's important. Let me throw them at you and see what you do with them. She says, number one, a gap year gives young people a space to focus on others rather than themselves, helping them leave behind the developmental narcissism of adolescence. It allows them to take a breather after an intense academic journey toward college admittance, but more importantly, it allows them to explore their unique interests and talents and to give back to society in some way. The benefit of this pause in their otherwise linear academic careers is that it allows for questioning, exploring, and emotional maturation. It gives young people a space to focus on others rather than themselves, helping them leave behind the developmental narcissism of adolescence. It also provides a new and different perspective on working and being an adult.
So there's obviously, she is again writing from the perspective of a year of mandatory national service, right? That she saw in Israel, because that's why she's talking a lot about, what does she say? It gets them to focus on other people, right? Leave behind developmental narcissism of adolescence, focus on others rather than themselves. Obviously, the way I have described it, and you and I are talking about it, a person could still be pretty narcissistic, right? Because I'm not necessarily saying you have to do something that's like service-oriented. A part of the reason why I'm not saying that is because that still sounds to me, except for if you're talking about military service, if you're just talking about like volunteer-oriented service rather than thinking about like a career or career-type work and vocation, it still sounds to me like, well, it's something you almost have to be supported in. And look, I was still living at home when I was working at Toyota, but I definitely could have been living on my own. Had I got married, had I, had a change in situation, I could have lived on my own, right? So that part I'm going to just sort of caveat and say, yeah, less so am I thinking about the getting them to think about others and focus on others in terms of service orientation. But the other thing she says, the benefit of a pause in their otherwise linear academic career that allows for questioning, exploring, emotional maturation. Agree with all of that. Yeah. I agree with all that, and that 100% does in ways that you don't really realize until you do it, because it is very linear. It is very easy to just tack on college as the thing that comes after high school. Yeah, and it really, again, at a very important time, I think, in a young person's life, when they are also expected to be becoming more independent, thinking more on their own. They're kind of stunted in that if they are just shoved right into the college experience without thought to anything else.
I think that the definite takeaway is if you can tell that a young person is not taking in the difference in terms of what they're signing up for between high school and college, you need to make sure that milestone is really clear. A part of, I think, the reaction against all of the debt that has been incurred at college is that I think sometimes young people are treated in such as to say, don't ask too many questions. You just got to go to college because if you don't, who knows what will happen to you. Know that milestone is the number one place where a young person is going from you endure learning what is expected of you as a child, that high school graduation milestone, because when you start college, that is the beginning of the certainty of, look, you are making an adult decision to take on debt most of the time. Mm-hmm. You're making here a decision that is going to affect the rest of your life. Yes, financially, because of the debt that you take on, but in terms of, listen, if you take in ideas, this is a thing that I've seen that's really dangerous at college. People just can adapt and take ideas into them in a similar way that they did as kids when, look, all of the ideologies are in play in college. Right. All of the all the adult activities that you will have are in play at college. Mm-hmm. You are making adult decisions, and you better understand that. It'll affect the rest of your life. It will affect college. I mean, this is not rocket science to anybody. College will affect the kind of marriage that you have. Right. College will affect the kind of job that you have. College will affect your attitude, your general outlook on life. Yeah. And you can't walk into it with this idea of, well, I can't be blamed because I was just a young person who went in there and just soaked everything in. No, you actually, one of the things also that we don't talk about is you're going to have to figure out which ideas are good for you and which are harmful. Yeah. Because you will have both, and that is in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. And if you are not ready to do that, I would say don't go to college, because you will. Having known young people who lost themselves in college, and having known young people who had a great experience there. Look, you just need to know that it is intense. There are adult things at every level happening there. Yeah. And so you cannot look at it in the same way that you looked at school as a child, as a young person.
Yeah, because one of the things, there's two things I would say, piggybacking off of what you said, and that is when you go to college, you are given all of the behavioral opportunity of adulthood, but without the same responsibilities of adulthood, typically, right? And it just has to be said, that's a dangerous place to be, especially without an
idea of the consequences, right?
Yeah, and without a developed character, and without again a developed fortitude and resilience. You're being given a loaded gun without the know-how of how to use this thing wisely and safely. That's really what is happening so often with young people, and why you see some of the things that you see and some of the regret that people have. And and this and that. So that's one thing I would say, yes, 100%. Like, that is the sort of the dichotomy, or not dichotomy, the sort of, I don't know, dual things at play with college, is that it both doesn't require the same responsibilities of adulthood, but yet does provide pretty much all of the behavioral opportunities, both, especially the negative ones, of adulthood.
It kind of encourages you to toy with all of the accoutrements of adulthood, right? And without an understanding of the consequences, and in a lot of ways with a shielding of the consequences, and that's just not good training.
Right. And so, but then I also would say, in addition to that, it also has to be said of what typical universities are today, and that is that they are very ideologically heavy in one direction, and that is in a much more liberal direction. And I don't just mean politically. I mean politically, theologically, socially, all of these things. And maybe you hear that and you go, "Oh, that's fine with me." Okay, well, that's fine, but like, you do need to be aware of that going into it, that is what's happened, so that you ought not be surprised whenever the students who you have sent into that, having already prolonged their adolescence, having shielded them from perhaps the development and discipline that grows from being a part of the workforce, you are now throwing them into that, and you're absent. You can't be surprised when what comes out the other end is something that you might not be satisfied with if you're a parent, right? So that has to be acknowledged as well.
I mean, I guess the second thing that she said is pretty similar to mature into healthy adults. Our children must embrace their capacity to serve others, so they can shed the self-orientation of youth in a society that too often fosters narcissism.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It again goes back to a little bit of the direction she's coming from, but even still, when you are put into the workforce and and you come to the understanding of, I get paid so long as I work and do my job.
Right.
That does definitely reorient you a little bit from the narcissism that can develop from, well, I mean, like, everything is handed to me. Like, all of the things that I need are here. My housing is here. It's given to me, whether by parents or by governmental loans or other government assistance programs, whatever the case might be. There is definitely a sense of entitlement that can be prolonged, or that can be allowed if you go directly into college, that potentially can help be stayed off if you take a year and work.
Yeah.
I think, along with a good work ethic, along with discipline, like, good character develops when you work hard to make a living. I just think there's something natural and God ordained about that. That is oftentimes sidestepped or short-wired.
It's
short-circuited, excuse me. And
one of the strangest things about adulthood to me is the stories that adults are tempted and or choose to tell themselves about, say, why I'm not getting a promotion, why opportunities don't come my way. Look, there are situations where it matters who you know, that there is truth in that. But in my experience, in pretty much every profession that I have gotten to see and gotten to talk to people about, one of the wonderful things about church is you get to talk to a lot of different people who are doing a lot of different things. But look, if you show up on time expecting to work, and you do your work and you do a good job at it and treat people all right, I have not seen a situation where, one, they don't keep you, two, you don't ascend to places where you would want to be in that. And look, I'm not saying to everybody, you got to take every promotion that comes to you. No, look, find things that you love to do and do them. We tell ourselves, one of the strangest things to me about adults is we tell ourselves certain stories like, oh no, I've been passed over and I'll always be passed over. It's like you're helping yourself lose.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, yes, sometimes people are passed over who shouldn't be, but you do not help yourself by letting that story dominate you, because if you show up and work hard, that will be eventually appreciated.
Right.
And this world all the time is in need of people who understand what it means to accept responsibility, who can be counted on to do a good job and to take that responsibility seriously. It's just, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. We're talking especially specifically here about our culture here in the U.S. And some of the things you might be hearing us say, if you're listening in like a third world country right now, some of this maybe doesn't compute. We apologize for that, but I 100% agree that if you show up, if you work hard, if you're faithful in your job, and if you do so with a good attitude, I promise you that recipe will result in things going well for you in the workforce. I promise you it will. And if things are going poorly for you, if you are getting passed over for promotions, if you are losing jobs, if you are having a hard time making it at a job and whatever, one of those things is not in place. Either you're not showing up, you're not working hard, or you're doing so with a bad attitude. I promise if you do, basically, I think those three things. If you do those three things, then it will go well with you.
Yeah, and I would say, look, there are bad workplaces. You might have gotten in somewhere and it was just a terrible place to work. Listen, take heart. There are better workplaces. Don't give up. You show up and work hard, you will be appreciated sooner or later. It will happen. It will happen.
Yep, agreed.
Third thing, we are rushing and pushing our children to set future goals and achieve academically, she says, so they can get on a linear career path before they have even discovered who they are or what they're capable of. And I think we've spoken to that, and that's true. What do you say to that?
I say yes. She said she is saying we get them on this academic path before they've discovered who they are or what they're capable of. And this is where I think I agree with her in what she's saying is that unlike what many people say, they say you discover yourself at college. No. You should have discovered yourself before you go to college, whatever that means. And I'm sort of using the term even though I think it's pretty ambiguous. I would want to pinpoint exactly what we're talking about when we say discover yourself or discover who you are. You need to do that before you start spending thousands of either your own dollars or other people's dollars in order to get this degree. Because you could be wasting a lot of somebody's money if you do so otherwise. Not only could you be wasting a lot of someone's money, but it is true. You could find at the end of that linear path, well, shoot, I really wish I had taken a different turn back there at the beginning of this 4-year endeavor that I've or 5-year endeavor for guys like us that I've just completed. Wouldn't it be nice if you had just taken a pause, as she and we have proposed, if you had just taken a pause near the beginning of that to just, hey, let's take some time to think through this very long, very expensive decision before we take the next step forward. I think, again, I mean, like, I really did. There was a significant shift in my mind from when I went from college student, who I worked all through college, part-time jobs, right? But transitioning from that to, I am now a full-time employee who makes a salary and all of this so long as I show up and work. And I have, not only that, I have opportunity to show up and work and better myself in this job and in this position, all these kinds of things. There was just a significant, notable shift in my thinking from basically what it looks like to live as a child, as a dependent, and what it looks like to live as an adult. And that's an important shift that really does help you in your thinking a lot. Yeah.
As we're getting towards the end here, I would just say to parents and to those who are kind of in this kind of college age or coming to that. I remember years ago, I think it was when I was looking at some ACT prep material. It might have been for another student or something. There was something on there called a world of work map, and it encouraged you to think about, okay, do you like working of these 4 things? What do you like working with? Is it ideas? Is it people? Is it things? Or is it sort of like techniques? So things, by the way, is sort of like logistical work, thinking about organizing things and moving things and these sorts of deals. And so ideas, people, things, and techniques. One encouragement I have is to young people is, look, go ahead and get your degree. It's very unlikely. Like as you starting out in accounting, you recognize pretty quick, I need to shift away from this. Well, that's fine. You can shift away, but try to get out of there, because that'll be, if you end up in anything remotely interesting to you, that degree will be of use. Very few people work exactly in the field where they got their degree. But it's helpful if you think about ideas, people, things, techniques, to realize, I probably will end up somewhere in the realm of an interest of mine, which employers will look at what you have and they will say, I see you have knowledge of this. You have shown me you can complete. I mean, if you've gotten out of college, you can show me that you can complete a set of obstacles, and that is appreciated. And so then take heart. That makes you look employable. Then you got to show up and prove you're employable. Yeah. And that is why you're more employable when you're not stressed out by a whole lot of student debt. So
right.
You get out of there. You're more employable, as we've been talking about, when your expectations are realistic. Because here's the challenge. You don't want to be run down and frustrated by this education situation and then show up at a job with this chip on your shoulder, with this sense of entitlement, angry, and you can be there, and you can, and that's sort of what's a lot at the backdrop of what we've been talking about. You don't want to end up there. Right. You want to show up and to go, yeah, this is the kind of work that I am happy to do. Yeah. I get this kind of work. For me, just for instance, I could recognize that I like working at the intersection of people and ideas, and that's a lot of what you do in ministry. Right. And so you can consider this scheme, and I just really want it to be an encouragement that you will notice, from whether it's hobbies, whether it's things that are your family enjoys, that there are commonalities among these 4 different sets. Techniques, anything like welding, woodworking, whatever you feel you gravitate towards, that's good. Mm-hmm. God gave you that ability. Do not discount anything. We as a culture do count certain abilities. We put cachet around it. We talk about it like it's a big deal. God is not like that. He gives us abilities happily. And so take heart that the abilities that you have, God gave them to you. They matter. Use them. Use them to His glory and for your good, and it'll all work out okay.
Yep. I think if I may, I think I have like 3 closing remarks I would want to make in relation to this. This has all been, as you can tell, a very practical podcast. I hope that it's been helpful and practical. But the 3 sort of closing remarks I would want to say is I think there are probably people out there who would say, well, I didn't take a gap year. I went directly into the college knowing what I wanted to do and got it, and things have worked out well for me. We say praise the Lord for that. We're not trying to say that what we're saying here is the only way. We're simply trying to push back on the opposite extreme, which is, I think, common, that is the actual next step that you have to take, right? We want to say, no, let's take a breath. Let's look at other options, right? Because there are other good options besides the typical path from high school directly into college and into what is next, right? So that's what I would say. If that worked out for you, if you didn't do things the way we're describing here, hey, that's great. Good on you.
I didn't, so.
Yeah, that's right. You're perfect. That's exactly right. Another thing I would want to say, I would just want to come right out and say, I would say, honestly, there are some degree programs that I would just encourage you do not get because they're useless. I don't think it's mean or wrong or I don't know, small-minded to say that. There are certain, and a lot of them are in kind of like liberal arts kind of degrees, that I would just tell you that is a waste of your money. Do not do it. If you have an interest in that thing, that does not constitute a good reason to spend thousands of dollars to get a degree in that thing. And just do some research and find out what are the degrees. As I said, I was told, accounting is a great degree because you can make good money doing it. In other words, you get a return on your investment. Yeah. And even though I ended up not wanting to do accounting and left that behind, the advice still was sound and made sense. Don't get a degree in basket weaving. It's going to be a useless degree, right? Yeah. There are also some degrees that you recognize. I know a lot of people with psychology degrees that unless you go on to get a master's or a doctorate, you make no money in that career, right? It just needs to be said.
A lot of the jobs are out of your reach unless you do, yeah.
Exactly. So you need to know that. And I'm just going to tell you honestly.
And you have to ask those questions.
You have to ask those questions. And I would say it to the face of the leaders of universities, even the one I went to, that a lot of these degree programs, they need to be told, if you're not going past the bachelor's, this is a useless degree. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to go out and say it. There was a bunch of them. I'd be happy to name names for people who want that. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing I would also say to take into consideration, if you are going to go to college, but you're recognizing the costs associated with it, lay aside any ego or idea associated with going to a particular college because of what the name on that college is.
Yeah.
There are amazing opportunities and degree programs at much cheaper universities and also community colleges and things like that. Great options there that are much cheaper. Don't run yourself into just tons and tons of debt in order to get these degrees. I went to USI in part because it was so much cheaper than other options. Here in Evansville, we have University of Southern Indiana, where I went. We also had the University of Evansville, which I frankly didn't even consider because it was so much more expensive. Yeah. And so I would encourage you in that too. I just don't think too many employers, if you get a degree from a place like USI instead of a place like University of Southern Indiana, which is a private university, I don't think
University of Evansville.
University of Evansville. I don't think too many people are going to look at the USI engineering degree or whatever and say, well, if only it was a UE engineering degree, then we would accept. No, that's just not the way it's going to work. So don't buy into the lie that you have to go to the very prestigious schools in order to do well. They're way too expensive. Don't go to them. Unless you're getting in for free with scholarships and stuff like that, I would just encourage you to steer clear of them. That's just practical advice from me to you. Take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, it is. Those universities, in my mind, are a gambit on trying to get to the highest echelons of society, and that's often why people who have the money are dedicating the money and investing it to try to get there. You don't have to do it. So I'm with you.
Yep. All righty.
All right. Been a good discussion. Thank you for letting me ask you a lot of questions. It's great to talk about just different parts of our lives, experiences. Yeah. I know this is not one we've talked about before, but one that when I read this article, it immediately was just apparent to me. This is so important to think this through for those of us who are parents, for anybody who is approaching this kind of phase, this season of your life. It's a wonderful season, but it is a period. It is a season of your life that I one of the things that's been really powerful as a Christian is I can be thankful for every season that God has given me in my life, but I don't look at any season and go, boy, I wish I could have stayed there.
Right.
I think that God gives very positive things in every season, and every season has its struggles as well.
That's right. Same. Yeah, it's fun to reminisce, kind of think back about how the Lord, it's encouraging because it is in a sense looking back at how the Lord has used the opportunities I've had, the things that have happened to me in my life and decisions that were made in order to bring me here. And I'm so thankful for where he has me right now.
Yep.
So wouldn't change it for anything.
All right, we're going to leave it there. This has been Empires of the Future.
We will see you in the future.